Hey, I'm Stephanie, and I have a question. Does skincare even work? Like, is it actually worth the money? A couple of years ago, I tested an expensive skincare regimen for the first time for 3 full months with before and after pictures, the whole shebang, because I needed to know if spending that much was actually worth it. And it was eye-opening. So now I'm doing it again, but bigger. Welcome to the Great Skinvestigation, where I'll be testing skincare products as scientifically as realistically possible for me to find out what's actually working and what's just marketing. The plan is this. I am testing products from various skincare brands in timed phases to see if they really make a noticeable difference in my skin in that time frame. I'll define what those categories and testing periods are a little later in the video because how I test them depends on what their claims are. But first, how will I determine whether there is a difference? Well, I will be tracking how often I use a product, journaling my experience, and using before and after pictures in natural light to document any changes. Because if I'm going to be spending my time and money on skincare, I want to make sure it's actually doing something. My goal for my skincare is to see visible and tangible results, ideally with a cosmetically elegant formulation. For me, that means that it feels pleasant to use, doesn't give me any heebie-jeebies from texture, it soaks in nicely, sits well on the skin, and plays well under makeup and with other products. Now, before I go into how I have broken all of this down, a quick note about where I'm starting from, because context matters. I'm in my mid-40s. I have never had any in-office treatments or cosmetic procedures other than basic professional cleanses and extractions. But no lasers, no filler, no Botox, or any other neurotoxin, nothing like that. I have nothing against any of those things, I just haven't done them. And that's important for context for everything that you're going to see in this series. What I have done is use at-home devices, things like microcurrent, at-home laser therapy, red light therapy, and gua sha. So that's the baseline that we're working with. Now, let's talk about how I'll be categorizing my skincare. Since there are so many different products with so many different claims out there on the market, I think it's important to keep things organized. I'm a musician, so when it came time to divide the skincare into categories for this test, I couldn't help but think of it in those terms. So here's how this breaks down. The first category is what I'm calling rock star skincare. It's often the star of the show and gets a lot of hype, so I want to see if it's actually famous for a reason. This category contains products that actively change the constitution of the skin over time by influencing things like cell turnover, cell signaling, or by increasing or decreasing production of things like collagen or pigmentation. We're talking things like retinols, growth factors, vitamin C, and they tend to have a cumulative effect the longer you use them. Then there's backing band skincare. Every rock star needs a solid backing band, and although they're not as high profile as the lead singer, they're just as important to putting on a good show. In skincare, that looks like hydration and moisturization. Ingredients like hyaluronic acid and ceramides that hydrate the skin, lock in moisture, and help prevent things like dryness and irritation. Their effect stays pretty consistent over time, meaning they do their job every time you use them, but the benefits don't necessarily stack over time the way rockstar skincare does. And then we have crew skincare. No one ever really sees the backstage crew, but no concert ever happens without them. They're the ones setting up, taking down, and running the show behind the scenes. And in my opinion, they are deeply necessary and tragically underappreciated. In skincare, the crew category is preventative. Things like sunscreen and DNA repair enzymes. Their whole job is to keep your skin healthy by preventing and repairing environmental damage like from UV radiation. This is actually one category where I don't necessarily expect to see any visible changes because the whole point is to prevent changes from happening. For example, changes from sun damage. But I still consider it an essential part of any well-rounded routine because it's investing in the future health of my skin. Now you might be thinking, okay, cool system, but why should I care what works for your skin? And I think that's a fair question. Here's the thing, I'm not just testing whether I personally like these products, I'm testing whether the claims they make actually hold up. So if a product says it reduces sunspots, I'm documenting whether mine fade. If it claims to improve firmness, I'm tracking whether my skin's firmness improves. Now, does that guarantee that it will work exactly the same way for you or anyone else? Not necessarily, because skincare is always personal. Everybody's physiology is a little bit different. But at least you'll know whether the product has the potential to do what it says it does, which is a heck of a lot more information than most of us have when we're standing in front of a counter or a shelf trying to decide if something is worth the money. Now, I realize not every product fits perfectly into just one of my three categories, and I'm not going to pretend that my system is flawless, but I feel like that just kind of reflects reality because roles aren't always static, they're just kind of there to help us organize things. Just like one person can be the lead singer in one band, a backing vocalist in another, and then help out as a crew member for other shows, these products don't always fit neatly into one box. A good example of that is something that I'm currently testing, DNA repair enzymes from Photozyme MD. On the surface, those are solidly crew skincare because their claim is that they help to prevent collagen degradation from oxidative and UV damage. But here's the thing. A lot of people report reductions in sunspots when using this technology. So this might actually be a rock star product in disguise. And that is precisely why I am putting it through a 3-month rock star style wear test to find out whether there is a visible difference or whether it really is just preventative crew skincare. I'll be sharing those results when my test is complete in about 3 weeks. So if you want to see how that plays out, make sure you're subscribed and send me a sunshine emoji in the comments so that I'll know you're interested. But that's just one specific product line. So let's zoom out now and talk about how I'm testing everything, because the methodology here is what makes the whole thing work. And maybe you'll even want to take this methodology and use it for yourself with the products that you're most curious about. Any skincare product that fits into the rockstar category naturally takes more time to test because it gains effectiveness the longer it's used. Skin renews itself in cycles, and that typically takes about 90 days. So when testing active ingredients, I don't necessarily expect to see a difference until my skin has completed at least one full cycle. And that's why I'll be testing products in this category in 3-month blocks. That gives me enough time to potentially see whether or not the product makes a difference. I've actually done this before with Calisym skincare, and I'll link that video in case you want to see what this kind of test looks like in practice, because that gave me such clear answers that I knew I wanted to do it again, but bigger. And that's exactly what I'm doing here during the Great Skinvestigation. So how exactly do I plan to test products from all three categories? My main focus this year is going to be on rockstar skincare. I have a meticulous testing schedule set up for the whole year where I'll be testing things like DNA repair enzymes, growth factors, peptides, and tools. Sometimes I'll be testing things all over, but sometimes I'll be testing similar products head to head. And when I do that, I will be dividing my testing ground into quadrants, the 2 halves of my face and the 2 halves of my neck and chest. Because Rockstar Skincare is the star of the show, the backing band is going to remain the same for most of the year. So let me tell you what those products are and why I chose them. And I know walking through a product list might not sound thrilling, but here's why it matters in this case. This base regimen is the foundation for every single test I'm doing this year. If I'm testing a new vitamin C on half of my face, you need to know what's on the other half. If I see changes, you need to know what else I'm using that might be contributing. So think of this as setting the stage, because everything else that I test will be measured against this baseline. My base facial skincare for this year will be the Photozyme MD DNA Youth Recovery Serum, which I purchased myself, the Versed Daily Recovery Rich Barrier Cream, which was initially sent to me in PR, but then I liked it so much that I repurchased it myself, the Original 101 Ointment Multi-Purpose Super Balm from Lanolips, which I purchased myself, Paula's Choice Super Light Daily Wrinkle Defense Broad Spectrum Mineral Sunscreen, which I purchased myself, and Ivermectin Cream, which was prescribed to me by my dermatologist for my rosacea. The tools I'll be using are my Omnia Red Light Masks, which I purchased myself, and the Rajani MD Plasma Glow LED Lip and Mouth Device, which I requested in PR. My base body skincare for the year will be the Photozyme MD Omega 36 Body Complex, which I purchased myself. So why did I choose these specific products? Let's start with Photozyme. After the research that I did on DNA repair enzymes, I felt like they would be a smart addition to my routine because I have been a lifelong sun bunny. I grew up on the coast. I now live near a beautiful lake. So whenever it is hot outside, I am either on the water, in the water, or near the water, which means I get a lot of sun. And despite the fact that I wear broad spectrum sunscreen, wide brimmed hats, and UV protective clothing, I still manage to get a very deep tan every year. So the instant I learned about DNA repair enzyme technology, I dove down a deep rabbit hole to find what I thought would work best for me. And I chose Photozyme MD because their products can make sunscreen even more effective in the preventative skincare department. They are fragrance-free, and I like the way they formulate their products. I'll be going into more detail about the technology and ingredients and products once I complete my test, and I'll share the results in a few weeks. But I have already finished my first 2 months of testing, and no matter what the final results are with the sunspots, I can already tell you that I am very happy with both of these products. They're cosmetically elegant, they're moisturizing yet lightweight, they sit well under makeup, and they make my skin feel incredibly soft. And because I consider these an investment in the future health of my skin, I do plan to continue using them as my base throughout the year. Even though I'm expecting Photozyme to simply be a crew product, I was curious to see if it could potentially reverse some of the visible sun damage that I have. So I am testing it the way I would typically test a Rockstar product for 3 months as my only new skincare to find out which category this truly sits in. But that's an exception for the crew category. For the most part, I wouldn't be testing crew skincare on its own for 3 months because I don't expect to see visible changes from preventative skincare. So if, for example, I test new sunscreens during the Great Skinvestigation, I'll be evaluating them more for cosmetic elegance, functionality, and practicality. That is the sort of thing that I can test over a couple of days or weeks instead of several months. And the same goes for backing band skincare. Anything that's just intended to play a supporting role with hydration and moisturization can also be tested in a much shorter window. So now back to my other base skincare items. I chose the Versed Daily Recovery Rich Barrier Cream because it works really well at moisturizing and soothing my skin, but also because it is genuinely difficult to find a basic moisturizer these days. Companies are constantly trying to pack every single new technology into their products, and that isn't necessarily bad, but it isn't necessarily good either. Sometimes the individual amounts of those rockstar ingredients are so low that they end up being more of a marketing claim than anything that's effective. And even when a product is great, some people have sensitivities to certain ingredients, niacinamide, for example. Or sometimes we want to alternate the use of certain actives or only use them during a certain time of year. For example, if I'm going to be in the sun all summer, I'm probably not going to want to reach for a very strong retinol. So I wanted a basic moisturizer that could maintain balance on my skin without influencing any of my testing. And as someone with rosacea and a little bit of eczema, this cream feels soothing without being too heavy. It's comfortable, it's enjoyable to use, it's fragrance-free, and it is perfect for these tests. The Lanolips Original 101 Ointment Multi-Purpose Super Balm has been my go-to lip mask ever since Bite Beauty discontinued their famed agave lip mask. But I think I like this one even better because it doesn't have a flavor or a scent, and I have also been using this as a slugging mask under my eyes for the past several years. In my opinion, it's the superhero in that regard. The Paula's Choice Super Light Daily Wrinkle Defense Broad Spectrum Mineral Sunscreen was something that several of my viewers recommended when I mentioned that I needed a new mineral sunscreen. So this is what I'm currently trying since sunscreen has long been a core element of my routine. And the ivermectin cream is just there to keep my rosacea in check. At this point, I am planning to use it all year, although that will depend on what my dermatologist thinks, since I will be deferring to his expertise when it comes to rosacea and how it impacts my skin barrier. When it comes to red light therapy, that has been a go-to of mine for several years now. I find that it generally helps my skin look fresher and more resilient and firm when I use it regularly. I had gotten away from using it for a few months just due to time constraints, and during that period, I developed a small patch of eczema right here. But once I started using the red light masks again, I noticed that the patch would fade as long as I used them regularly. And because it clearly has an effect on the chronic inflammation on my face, I want to continue using it as my base therapy. But I am testing the Rajani MD Plasma Glow LED lip and mouth device for my lips and gums. And I think it's actually the perfect example of how to test an additional product without it becoming a confounding factor. Because I'm adding red light therapy to an area of my face that isn't currently being tested for anything else. My lips and gums haven't had any significant previous exposure to red light because my mask doesn't really cover this area. Plus, the device also has a tooth whitening function, which should hopefully give me some clear before and afters. Right now, I'm using the tooth whitening tray on its own, but once I have completed my initial 3-month test, I can add this Glow White tooth whitening gel, which the team at Rajani MD were kind enough to include in my PR package. But I was really curious to see how effective the blue light would be on its own first. And that's a theme of the Great Skinvestigation. How do products perform when I actually take the time to see how they work before making adjustments and adding new things? But speaking of adding new things, my primary goal goal is to see how effective products are in the long term. But I also have to somehow do this in a way that works with my life and with my job of testing makeup and skincare. So I needed to think about how I could test the backing band and crew skincare products without confounding the longer Rockstar tests. And here's what I came up with. When I first begin testing a new Rockstar product, that will be the only skincare that I add to my base routine. If my skin feels stable after several weeks, I can then add one backing band or crew product at a time because their effects typically don't last more than 24 to 48 hours. So that gives me a couple of weeks to test anything that I need to, whether that's replacing something like my sunscreen or trying something new that I've received in PR. And then 2 weeks before my final Rockstar before and after picture and evaluation, then I will go back to only using that Rockstar skincare and my base routine. That way, the results that we see really are just from that product and not muddied by anything else. So, for example, I recently received this Talova Botanical Elixir in PR, and when I first got it, I only used it as a hand treatment because I wanted to thoroughly test the Photozyme serum on my face without any additional factors. But I enjoyed this so much on my hands that this past week I decided to give it a go on my face for a while. This is mainly a moisturizing product that claims to quench and rebalance the skin barrier, so this is exactly the sort of thing that I can test for just a couple of weeks and get an accurate idea of how it works without ruining my other tests. So I will be reporting back about this soon. But I'd love to know if you've even heard of or are interested in this brand. I personally had never heard of it before receiving this, but now that I've looked into them, this product seems somewhat similar to Vintner's Daughter, that really expensive facial oil that everyone seems to love. That one has long been on my wish list to try, but it always seemed like too much of a stretch for me price-wise, especially for an untried product. I think the 50 milliliter bottle of Vintner's Daughter costs around $355 US last time I checked, while this 59 milliliter bottle of Talova is $85 US, which still isn't cheap by any means, but if it is a comparable product, it would be a more accessible option. So leave a flower emoji in the comments if you would watch a review of this. And that is my general plan, isolating products as much as I realistically can, while also taking care of myself and my job. If at any point a product just isn't working for me, or if my dermatologist tells me that I need to adjust, or if I like a product so much after testing that I want to integrate it into my base routine, I will make changes. But if I do, I will update you in future videos in the Great Skinvestigation playlist. Over the next year, you're going to see me test everything from DNA repair enzymes to growth factors to peptides to at-home lasers and vitamin C. Some will even be head-to-head comparisons of similar products at different price points to see where the real value is. The first results drop is coming at the beginning of March. That's the Photozyme sunspot test that I mentioned earlier. After that, we'll be testing growth factors. So if you want to see how all this plays out, subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the results. Do you feel like doing something similar, maybe with products you already have? I know I spent many years just randomly using my skincare without ever really knowing how much of an impact it was actually having on my skin. So if you feel like doing your own skinvestigation, let me know what you'll be testing in the comments, or if you have any other questions for me or products you'd like to see me try. If you enjoy down-to-earth testing of skincare and beauty products, make sure to like, subscribe, and check out this video here. Thanks for hanging out, and to all of my patrons and channel members, including my Adagio angels, for making tests like this possible. I hope we can all remember that even stumbling is a form of moving forward. So let's stumble in style.